Bristol University. He's going to tell us all about the science of climate change.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, first of all, it's fabulous to be here upstairs in the pavilion at Gloucestershire County Cricket Club. So my name's Steve Simpson. I'm a marine biologist based at the University of Bristol, and I also run a master's course in science communication for a better planet. And it's actually because of that I'm here, because one of my amazing students, Izzy, where are you, Izzy? Izzy, for our summer placement, worked at the cricket club and actually has been instrumental in trying to make some of this happen. So thank you, Izzy, and thank you, Peter, and to the whole club for hosting Izzy through that placement. Now, it's always exciting when I come upstairs into this pavilion, because when I turn around, it means that I can see my house, and I can see the school that my children went to primary school, the Brunel Fields Primary School. And this is where my kids first discovered cricket. They both love cricket, thankfully. That's the two nearest, and then my nephew as well. And this was actually, I'm not sure whether this was the exact one, when I taught my daughter Camilla how to score, which she's obsessed with now. She's 16, so she's kind of grown up from it now. When she first started scoring, I brought her to the one day against the West Indies, where Chris Gale didn't score 120, and I was trying to show her what you might do if someone hit a boundary when you're scoring. You know, what does a 4 look like when you cross 4 numbers off in one go? What does a 6 look like when you cross 6 off? And then Maureen Ali came out to bat, and Camilla just spent the rest of the time 6, 6, 6. So it really is a place that we have a lot of fun watching cricket. So it's great to be here and to be able to be part of this. Now, when I'm not here, I'm generally underwater. I'm a marine biologist. I spend a lot of time around the world diving, exploring coral reefs particularly, working with fishing communities in the developing world, increasingly working in India, which you know as a place where at the end of every day, on every street corner is a game of cricket. So it's a really wonderful place to work. And the fast bowlers that are kind of age 7 and can throw a tennis ball at you at a pace you can't even see is quite amazing. I was working originally in Australia, and that's where I first started listening to coral reefs. Now, this is a picture from Blue Planet 2, and I'll tell you a bit about that in a minute. But I was lucky to go off and spend some time underwater taking recordings of coral reefs, originally for the series, because the series wanted to have the vibrant coral reef soundscape as part of the soundtrack of the series. What we realised was that as we started recording in surround sound, we could actually hear the health of the reef. We could hear biodiversity. We could use sound to measure whether this is a healthy environment. And I was lucky to spend probably about 15 years in primarily Australia, but also India, the West Indies in cricket terms, but Southern Caribbean, Northern Caribbean, the Bahamas, and different places, witnessing the beauty and majesty and magic of the underwater environment. The only thing I really had to put up with was that this was in the early noughties, and so spending 6 months in Australia every year was painful, because you would watch England traipse over to Australia and get. I was there for the 5-0 absolute destruction of England, so it was tough in that respect, but otherwise it was wonderful. And then, as a marine biologist, you started to see that not all environments were healthy. Actually, we went to the Philippines and saw that fishing could decimate coral reefs. And while we were working in Western Australia, we were then hit by probably the original Western storm. It was a cyclone that walked across Ningaloo Reef at walking pace and destroyed the reef. Now, that's a natural process, of course. We have cyclones, we have hurricanes, and so on. What we're starting to become concerned about is that maybe it's not just totally natural. Maybe we're starting to see slightly more frequent extreme storms. Maybe we're starting to see that the severity of those storms is getting greater. And I think we're witnessing this the world around now, that the ocean particularly is being stirred. So we think that about 80% of global warming so far has been absorbed into the ocean. The ocean's got warmer, and we've stayed relatively cool as a result. But that water is making those oceans more volatile. So we're starting to see the birth of hurricanes going from force 1 to force 5 in 24 hours as a result of this extra energy in the ocean. Now, we witnessed this on the Great Barrier Reef in probably one of the most devastating ways, in that we could see that the oceans were warming, and we could predict that actually the reefs were going to cook. This was during the making of Blue Planet 2, and hopefully you know that Bristol is, as well as a great cricketing city, it's also green Hollywood. This is where many of the natural history films in the world are made. And tragically for Blue Planet 2, we'd filmed some of the most magical things on the Great Barrier Reef, and then we could see that the bleaching was coming, and we were able to get the crews out and actually film the entire reef bleach. Now that's where the corals go white. They can't hold the algae that live inside them because the waters are too warm, and it starts to break down that relationship. As a result, the corals starve to death and die. And we saw about 80% of the Great Barrier Reef where we were working die. Now that was 2016. This is the most recent water temperature graph, where you can see that between the poles, so 60 degrees south to 60 degree north, we're now in pretty much unprecedented water temperatures. We went for over 365 days straight with the hottest temperature for that calendar day on record. So we're now in a position where perhaps we're starting to push the oceans to what we call tipping points, a place where that volatility and the energy of the ocean is something that we can no longer really even predict what that might look like. Now, for our researchers, and I'm really lucky to have many great students, Izzy's one of them, but many great students that increasingly don't get to go around the world and witness beauty, witness the magic of nature. They actually go and witness the sad decline of many marine and terrestrial environments. And that starts to actually take a toll on our students. We see this in terms of eco-grief, where they witness something personally, but also eco-anxiety. And actually, we've just welcomed 220 new biology undergraduates to Bristol University last month, and we had a session on eco-anxiety. We realised that half of the students arrive at university concerned about the future, actually perhaps feeling no agency, no opportunity to actually make a difference themselves, but living in fear of what the future might hold. And actually, I think a session like today is where we start to change that narrative. We do all have agency. When I become a we, and we start forming the networks and the groups and the clubs and the teams, we can start to make bigger actions possible. And that's the first step. Eco-anxiety might be the entry level to going and doing something about it. So our challenge is to find ways of helping people that are caught in that initial rut, which can be really devastating, to be able to move past it and take that emotional energy into more positive action. We've worked with climate charities, particularly working with the 16 to 25-year-old age bracket. And if you're interested in some of that, have a look at Hold This Space. But it gets young people to start to think about what a better future might look like. And I think that's what we're going to be doing this evening, to imagine, but not just imagine in dream world, imagine that we have a series of actions that we can actually go and make happen, what that could start to play towards. I'm also a coach of the Brunel Bantams, and we probably definitely suffer a fair amount of grief. We're up against some of the top teams in South West now. We played Bath and Wiltshire, and our mission was to lose by less than 10 goals in the under-14s, which thankfully we did. We lost 6-0. But one thing that we recognise in our young people is that sport is one of the most powerful medicines to the state of the world. We see this in adult groups too, that sport is something that brings us together in a very positive mindset, to play together, to work together, to collaborate together, and actually to try and make good things happen. I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, despite the fact that coral reefs are in real trouble, there is this act of hope that happens on reefs every year, and that's the mass spawning events. Any living corals still have it in them to produce millions of eggs that then are released up into the water. They develop out in the plankton and then settle down as the next generation, hoping to have a life on that coral reef. And I think we find inspiration from that, because actually if the corals still dare to dream that there's a future for them, then so should all of us. But they don't just dream like a blind belief system, they dream like an active hoper. And that's somebody who, because they have hope, makes it a daily practice, like a sports person would do. If you want to be a sports person, every day you practice. If you're a yoga practitioner, every day you practice. If you're a musician, every day you practice. And if hope is something that you actually care about, then that has to become the daily practice that we all engage with. And if we do, then hope starts to become a reality. I was really lucky to work with the BBC on a series called Our Changing Planet, where we actually took that idea of hope, went to the Maldives, and we were able to collect coral eggs, rear them in safe environments and settle them onto coral reefs. And it was an opportunity to start to spread that message of hope to much wider audiences. With sport, with cricket, with Gloucestershire County Cricket Club, you've got wide audiences. You've got access to a real diversity of people here. Not just people who might want to listen, but people who might want to get involved as well. Now, I was out with Steve Baxwell last night, and this week there's a Wild Screen Festival, which is all of the natural history filmmaking world together in Bristol, celebrating all of the most recent work. And Steve Baxwell, as you know, you might know, is married to Helen Glover, the Olympic rower. And I was telling him about what we were doing here tonight, and he was so inspired by the fact that a cricket club is daring to actually bring everybody together and develop a concept of a community action plan to tackle some of the sustainability challenges, but also to use sport as a force for good. In reefs where we put some of that active hope into the ocean, we actually see the results. And I think it's inspiring that the next generation of corals and of people still have that opportunity to regenerate and to form a better future. I just want to finish on one thing, which is actually, when we think about it from a sporting perspective, you might often, when you're really getting beaten down, think, what are the easy wins? And one of the easy wins, in Blue Planet 2, we did a feature on noise pollution. Now, noise can be a problem in the oceans. There are millions of motorboats, about 50,000 large ships. There's offshore construction, there's oil and gas industry. There's lots of noise in the ocean. But noise is a very easy to control point source problem. Noise is something that we know exactly where it's coming from, exactly what's making it, and we've got the opportunity to change that. And I think in a sport environment, you've got that same situation, that you know exactly what the problem is, you know exactly where it's happening, and you're in complete control of it. So I think sporting venues, sporting clubs, sporting communities have that opportunity to be acting right now as a team on some of the easier wins. And so noise pollution I mentioned as an easy win. We know that it can really disturb marine life. It can affect whales, dolphins, fish, the whole lot. But we can also very easily start to change that. So we can think about boating channels that take boats away from coral reefs, particularly during the breeding season. And I'm really lucky to be able to collaborate with Mike Laughlin, who's here, who supports a PhD student at the university through Global Sustainable Sport. This is an organisation that is starting to recognise, and I'm sure that, that this really feeds very well into the same ethos, starting to see that there are ways of celebrating the good news that's in sport and using sport as a pillar to be able to, or a soapbox, to be able to talk about good practice. We've been working with our PhD student, Kathy Hobbs, with SailGP. SailGP are interested in the acoustic footprint of the sailing events and now looking at what electric boat engines will do to bring the noise pollution down at those events. And if they do that, it becomes then something that they can shout about. And I think that's one of the real beauties of sport, is that we all talk about it. Probably, well more than 1 billion people love sport, and many, hundreds of millions participate in it. It's competitive, but it can be healthy competitive rather than negatively competitive. So my hope is that if Gloucestershire County Cricket are bringing together the community, then other counties will start to be thinking, well, hang on a minute, we're behind the curve now, we need to be doing something. And that healthy competition and collaboration is something that can play out. Mike might be able to talk a little bit more about this on his table, and we can share some of these ideas. But the original idea of what sustainability can look like, which is simply economic, social and environmental pillars, can be something through sport that's much greater. And this is the idea that with sport we've got something that's global, something that is hugely talked about, mass participation, large amounts of finance in sport, and all of those things put together are the ingredients for sport to be possibly the greatest lever in society globally to be able to make these big changes. So I think this is a really exciting meeting. I'm really excited to be part of the discussions on tables. I can answer questions about various things through the evening. But thank you to Gloucestershire County Cricket Club and everyone for inviting me to be a part of this. Thank you.
I took a lot from that as well. I becoming we, collective action, active hoper. I like that one. But that's what tonight is all about as well. So we're going to go into the first round table session now. So all you guys are going to start talking. You're going to have an introduction. You've got a facilitator on the table. The three speakers and myself, we're going to circulate around as well if you want to catch one of us, or we can join your conversations. But speak freely, but respect each other, support each other, encourage each other, and try and pull out some of these ideas. You'll see on your table, intriguingly, you've got 2 plant pots, only one of which has a plant in it. You've also got some post-it notes there. If you don't get a thought out into the conversation, please write it down. We want to capture as much as we can from you. So please write it down on one of the post-it notes, tuck it into the plant pot, they'll all be collected up, they'll all be read, and they will all be recycled afterwards. So we're going to dive straight into the first round table, and I believe the facilitators will get you to introduce yourselves and then start those conversations. So we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes or so. Oh, that's the recorder, isn't it?